Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. My name is Brother Omar Fadhli, currently doing my PhD here in the Kuliah of Economics and Management Sciences, and I will be your moderator today. So first of all, before that, I would like to welcome all of you to the first ever Friends of CIE podcast series. Friends of CIE means Friends of Center for Islamic Economics podcast series, with the topics of conversations in Islamic economics, the past, present, and the future. And with us, we have Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam, a very prominent scholar in Islamic economics from our university. Not only in the local, but you can see if you Google his name. In fact, if you ask others in Islamic economics about him, his name is well prominent and known in the global arena for Islamic economics too. So I would like to welcome Prof to our podcast series today, and alhamdulillah we're able to get him. Before we start our conversation related to this topic, I think it's perhaps important for us to know about the speaker first. And you want me to explain a little bit about your background?
Just make it very brief,
Okay, so I wish the speaker himself can explain more about his background so that the audience will know. I know that Prof. Aslam is not teaching the undergraduates anymore for this semester.
Well, I do. Malaysian economy.
Oh, you still did? So I'm very sorry because I'm in PG already, so I did not know. So, but I think the class that you take right now is already not much for undergraduates. So perhaps many of you still not know about Prof. Aslam. So I wish he can explain more about his backgrounds to you, but I will tell you a little bit about his contributions and also his portfolio. Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam was our first batch in economics, in Bachelor in Economics in IIUM itself, in case you still don't know. Our university started in 1983, and Prof. Aslam, together with Prof. Rosita Amin, they are the first batch of economics from this university. And later he graduated in 1987 with being awarded the best student in IIUM. Later he went to UM, continuing his study in master's degree, and after that in PhD in East Anglia. And several achievements there are more achievements that Prof. Aslam made after that. He also was a visiting scholar at Georgetown University, United States, and was a fellow researcher at Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, United Kingdom. And later that, after he came back to IIUM, he started CIE, Center for Islamic Economics. As you can see, it is a center that is thoroughly researched about Islamic economics, Islamic finance, and other related areas. And Professor Muhammad Aslam became the director and involved in many international conferences in Islamic economics. And finally, he is now a deputy director of research, innovation, and development. So welcome to our Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam. Okay, so my first question is, before we go deep into these conversations, we would like to know about you a little bit, Prof. Could you tell us more about your background? How perhaps background is already being explained, but your involvement in this area of Islamic economics, how you get involved in it, and your experience in the area of Islamic economics, like for how long already you've been here, your involvement and other contributions, perhaps.
Okay, thank you, Brother Wan, and Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to all of you who are here. I think as mentioned by Wan just now, I am from the first batch of IIUM, so consider me your most senior alumni of the university. You have to keep in mind, when I joined as a student in 1983, Islamic economics was a very, very, very new topic to be discussed. In fact, before 1983, I had actually not really heard anything about Islamic economics. So whatever that the exposure to Islamic economics was in IIUM, right? Um, and the material that we had to read at that time was very, very, very scarce. There were just a few books, a few conference papers that were being, organized, uh, publications, and so we basically had to start talking about Islamic economics from almost zero. And I remember as a student of Islamic economics or economics in IIUM, the goal of our program at that time was not only to teach economics, but to also do comparative study between Islamic perspective, between the capitalist, schools of thought, and then the socialist schools of thought. So it was a very, you can say, a very ambitious agenda that we set in IIUM. And without the materials, and at a time when everything was new. But luckily, we had very dedicated academics. They may not have been exposed to Islamic economics like all of you are. You come to IIUM, you study Islamic economics. We have textbooks, we have many papers. But these pioneer lecturers, they were basically trained in conventional economics, but they had a great interest in the Islamic perspective. And you have to also keep in mind, late 70s and early 80s, this was the time globally that there was an Islamic resurgence starting, with the Iranian Revolution and then the invasion of Afghanistan by the Russian forces. So this was something that Muslims all over the world were regaining their consciousness of Islam. So it was that, you can say, motivation that our pioneer lecturers, like our first dean, Syed Osman Al-Habshi, Syed Abdul Hamid Al-Junaid, our lecturer, Al-Marhum Zakaria Man, Nick Mustafa, just to name a few, came and established our university with this big agenda to develop Islamic economics, and then later on Islamic management, accounting, and then much later Islamic finance, although Islamic finance is the most popular part of Islamic economics. So, and then we also were exposed to the teachings and the writings of the pioneer Islamic economists. Names, I hope all of you you have heard these names. Khurshid Ahmad, Najatullah Siddiqui, Muhammad Abdul Mannan, Muhammad Omar Chapra. Many of these were the few writings, many of these scholars were the few scholars who wrote in English. You had materials in Arabic, you had materials in Urdu, but of course in this university we focused on English. So we were exposed to the writings of these pioneer Islamic economists. And I think that was really the exposure to Islamic economics. And I can safely say that after graduating and I joined the university, my focus has been on Islamic economics. I don't do writing in conventional economics. Even if I do, it's always from a comparative perspective. So Islamic economics is basically what I have been focusing on. And the term Islamic economist, is something that developed also in the late 70s and early 80s. Somebody who is dedicated to developing the discipline of Islamic economics. So that, in a very brief nutshell, is what my background. IIUM for me has been Islamic economics.
Okay, Prof. So I can conclude that just small conclusion from just what you explained to me. The motivation coming from outside, from what's happening in the Middle East, revolution in Iran, and also some other countries. So it inspires and it leads to new awareness that there is cost of Islamic economics in any syllabus of university. And I would rather say that you realize that you will explore the new things, right? It's like Islamic economics. None of your perhaps other friend, perhaps from your high school, etc., trying to maybe or had listened or had known about this area. But so you make yourself brave in order to explore this area, and I would rather say that the phase of that time is the phase of awareness, right? So and then after awareness, people start to gather their energies, researchers, resources, and then afterwards. So we will come to the second questions. In the past, you already explained a little bit. Maybe you want to explain more on the past development of IE, Islamic Economics, in terms of academic and also about the graduate itself. So if you want to start in 1980s, maybe you can start from that. And how is it progressed up until today, 45 years later? And both in the global level and in Malaysia. And maybe later if you want to add about national policies too.
Okay, well, firstly, let me just add a bit. It's not only external influences. I think we have to keep in mind that in the late 70s and especially in the 1980s, there was also this growing consciousness of Islam in Malaysia. Right? I think 1980s, especially to me, I think was a very significant decade in Malaysia. A growing, interest in everything that is something to do with Islam. I remember as students in 1983, 4, 5, almost every week or every other week there would be some conference in UKM or in University Malaya or even in IIUM, Islam and something. Yeah? So there was a internal in Malaysia also this awareness about the need for us to look at our problems and to find solutions from an Islamic perspective. Yeah? So that was something internally. And I must also mention the setting up of IIUM and many of the other features that happened in Malaysia with the full backing of the Malaysian government also promoted this idea of Islamic economics. Now, having said that, if you look at the writings as an academic discipline, in the late 60s, in the 70s, and maybe even in the early 80s, most of the writings were very, very much general writings on Islamic economics, about Islamic economic system, people talking about certain concepts. In fact, many of the writings were actually written maybe not by economists. You would have the writings of some of the jurists, yeah, who would write on the fiqh aspect of zakat or the fiqh aspects of why riba is haram. Yeah? So this was the kind of material written. There were not much analytical writings in Islamic economics. But in the 80s, later on, we find that economists, whom we later call Islamic economists, they started writing economic themes. And these were more analytical in nature. So many of the articles that you find in Islamic economic journals started to come up, more analysis and so on. So I consider the 1990s as maybe the decade in which we saw the growing number of analytical articles, not necessarily more contributing to Islamic economics, because some of the early writings of the pioneers actually were very, very important milestones. Yeah. Later on, what happened is, while there were more analytical articles written, and many of them I'm sure you read it and you use it in your classrooms, but are they contributing to the discipline? And I think this is an important point. The foundations in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were very, very strong. Sometimes the analytical part becomes a kind of replica of conventional approach. And that later on becomes a criticism of not only Islamic economics, but mainly Islamic banking. A lot of criticisms on Islamic banking to say that it's not really something different. It's just like conventional banking, you're replicating, but now with fiqh terms and so on. So analytical, empirical articles not necessarily contribute to the discipline. So we have to actually think about how we want to contribute to the discipline by going to the foundations of the discipline. So that is something that I believe is an area that needs a lot of attention.
Sorry, Prof, to interrupt.
Yeah.
Because the format of podcast is supposed to have a conversation.
Yeah,
Sometimes I will
sure.
interrupt while you are talking, so it's
Interrupt.
more like of a real conversation
Okay.
between us. So when you mentioned about how in the past that the discussions are on this discussing about systems in generic theme. So I remember that when I go through all of the journals, many journals in the past, they're discussing in trying to posit Islamic economics in between the capitalism and socialism. Something that nobody is researching anymore today is because it's a debate in the past. So when you mention about that, it is kind of remind me those things. And So any comments from?
I mean, it's natural that in the 80s when you're just starting, what would you want to know? You would want to know that the Islamic perspective is neither capitalist, neither socialist. So we have a third way, right? So many of the writings focus on that. But you need to move beyond, because economics, if you're talking about economics, you're talking about Islamic economics, while it needs a system, it also needs analysis. It needs the analytical part, right? The challenge is, how do you make sure that the analytical part is based on the concepts and foundations that truly represent an Islamic perspective? And maybe I will jump straight away and connect that to what we are talking about now in IIUM, Tawhidic epistemology. Yeah, that in a nutshell is what we want to do for Islamic economics. We want to develop Islamic economics utilizing our sources of knowledge, which is both revelation as well as modern knowledge. So we want to have a kind of integration of the two, an Islamization of modern economics, a relevantization of our Turath, in a way that they are synthesized.
Is it not done yet in the past? Is it, or how is the difference of what we are doing right now?
You know, developing a new discipline or a new approach is not something that can happen overnight, right? You need people who are having that, if I can use the word, Quranic mindset, yeah, or with that Islamic worldview, and that's not going to happen overnight. Okay, it has to take time. We are now maybe 40 years. You mentioned it's just over one generation. It's not a very long time when you look at disciplines. After all, modern economics that we know today, if you take Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations or Theory of Moral Sentiments as the starting point, it's about 200 and what now 50 years maybe. So Islamic economics is only 50 years old or 45 years old. So it's relatively young. So it'll take time. Yeah, but we must always make improvement. That I think is what we have to ensure.
Okay, let's move to the next question. So I agree with Prof when he mentioned about actually sometimes we are too biased when we're hoping that Islamic economics can solve everything, like poverty in Africa as example. What happened in the Middle East? People mention, why not use zakat? Why not use socialist finance tools to solve everything? But in fact, in comparison to the modern economics, Western based basically, they started in 1776 from Adam Smith. So now, even today, after 300 years, around 300 years, close to that, they are still struggling to find their own identity and sometimes to solve much of their problems, right? So moving on to this second questions, what do you see in the future of Islamic economic development 45 years onwards? So we are discussing in the past 45 years. We're already moving here, on the current position. But what happened in the future in 45 years? And I would like you to explain in terms of about the graduates and also about the in the world of academia and also perhaps in national policies.
Okay, when you want to talk about the future, then I think we cannot run away from the fact that the future is going to be determined by our past and what we do today, right? So the past we have no control. Even today we have really no control. So we can only talk about planning for the future, right? So where are we today is going to determine what's going to happen in the future. Now, having said that, we need what I've put down as 3 P's. 3 P's. Yeah, P. the first, whatever this future is going to be, it's going to be determined by political will. When I say political will, I'm not talking about only the government. While it would be very good to have a government that supports what you want to do, like we've had in Malaysia, but it can also be in Muslim minority countries. For example, in America, the Muslim organizations are very well organized, and they have that will, that political will, although it's not government, but it's that commitment to doing something. All right, whether it's in America or in Europe, you have that will among the community. So that's the first thing that you need to have, political will. It can even be at the level of companies. A company that wants to implement an Islamic perspective, right? So the leadership, the employees employers and employees as a whole work together, political will. The second component is people. The people who are going to support the development of Islamic economics, right? So just now I mentioned in Malaysia, we had that political will. What did they do? They set up in 1983 Islamic Bank, Bank Islam. At the same time, they established IIUM. Okay, and to me this is very far-sighted, because you have a bank, an Islamic bank, but you have to think about the future. Who's going to work in that Islamic bank, right? So you need educated graduates who understand what is Islamic economics, what is Islamic banking. They will be the ones who work in the Islamic bank. And that's what we have today. Our graduates, alhamdulillah, are everywhere in Malaysia. You name the ministry, you name the bank. In fact, many of our graduates are now actually even CEOs of the bank, right? So we planned very well, right? So we have the people, not only the leaders, but even the workers, the mid-level, right? It may take another maybe one generation to really see the graduates who are coming from an Islamic economics background in the various levels of, let's say, decision making. So people, very, very important. And thirdly, the policies that you adopt. Now, let me just give one example. Compared to Malaysia, we've had few other countries, Iran, Pakistan, Sudan. In fact, they were even earlier than Malaysia in terms of introducing Islamic economic reforms. For example, the Islamic banking. They did it by what you may call revolution. Overnight, revolution happens. Tomorrow, all banks, Islamic banks. You change interest rate to profit rate, and you call it Islamic bank. All right? In Malaysia, we didn't do that. In Malaysia, we introduced dual banking system. So conventional banks are there. We introduced Islamic banks, or interest-free banks in those days. Why? Because a better way of introducing policy is to do it gradually. If you try to do things very quickly overnight, it is not sustainable. So you need the 3 Ps: political will, people, and the right policies. All right? And of the 3, I would say people is the most important factor. Why? What is the political will? Made up of the people. Who is introducing the policy? The people, right? So I would say the future of Islamic economics in Malaysia is well placed because we have given sufficient attention to the people factor. All right? Now, whether or not we are going to continue to be leaders in Islamic economics, we have been the leaders in this global Islamic economy report that comes out every year for the last, maybe 12, 13 years now. We have been leading. One of the big reasons is because we have leadership in Islamic economics and finance education, right? So everybody in the room here, you have a role to play. You have to be, just what we say.
So basically you are suggesting we cannot run away from politics, from aiming for the big positions. So you want to be CEO, COO.
As soon as you are a graduate, you are already in the top 30% of society, right? So you are going to be leaders. And as our song of the universities, leading the way, right? That you don't have a choice. And in my day, we used to be always reminded, you are meant to be agents of change. You go out and you become agents of change. Of course, change, to the better, right? And so you have no choice. You chose IIUM, and so you need to live up to that expectation.
Okay, I think that's good because other university also is aiming the same, right? So if you graduated from UM, UKM, maybe even from other overseas universities, they also aiming the graduates to go fly high. If you can set up more company, go for it. If you want to hold important position, CEO or having NGOs or whatsoever in politics, it depends on you. So they really encourage. So, but the difference in IIUM is it has different kind of mission and vision why you have to do that. So it's not joining the bandwagon of the crowd over there, following the Western practice, but you grab the positions but change it according to what is right to be done, of course, from the Islam perspective, right?
Yeah, of course, and certainly the idea of I remember when our first graduates were going to leave the university, many of our graduates got offered to work in Bank Negara Malaysia, and I remember they were in a way dilemma, because in the university you are taught about riba, and you shouldn't. This is haram. It's a very big haram and sin. And so when you get an offer from Central Bank of Malaysia, they were in a dilemma, or even from some of the other banks at that time, Bank Islam. Could we work in Bank Negara? Right? This is still in riba is still there in Malaysia. And I remember those professors that were asked this question. The answer was a wonderful answer. They said, "What is your intention?" Okay, if your intention is to join and then to be the agent of change, then go ahead, right? And I think that advice given is shown today, where IIUM graduates are now throughout in the banking system, in central bank, right, and in decision-making positions. And by doing that, we have promoted the development of Islamic banking and finance to where we are today. And I think by all accounts, Malaysia is considered to be number one in terms of Islamic banking finance. Although we may argue about what mainstream Islamic banking is, but it's still the alternative system is there. So if we didn't do that in 1987 and we left it to others, where would it be? So it's our role, it is our amanah. We have to take up that challenge and do it.
Okay, moving on to the next question, Prof. I will choose perhaps related to IIUM itself. So what happened in IIUM is they try to follow the mission of Islamization of knowledge. And through that, Islamic economics get birth from that process. In IIUM also, it has a mixed kind of approach. Like we have different kind of approaches from different manhaj, like those from fiqh, usul fiqh, from Islamic philosophy. And then we have, again, for those who not notice, Islamic philosophy also have their own branches, like those who follow the way of Professor Said Muhammad Naqib Alatas, and those who follow from the late Ismail Rajal Faruqi. So there are many others. So IIM is kind of a mix of those approaches. Hence, does it mean that Islamic economics can have different kind of versions in the future?
If you think about it, in the scholarship heritage of Islam, even in the area of fiqh, we have at least 4 schools, if not 5 or 6 schools, right? So in economics, there's bound to be more than one school, except that we probably have not come to the level where we have clear schools of Islamic economics yet. So in one of my earlier publications, I called it shades of Islamic economics. They are shades because we have not come to the detail and call it school yet. Okay. Now, having said that, what do we do in IIUM? You mentioned Islamization of knowledge or integration of knowledge. The idea here is, remember I mentioned earlier, Tawhidic epistemology. This is what our current phase is talking about. We want revelation, we want our turath, our heritage, and we want modern knowledge. Okay, so that's the idea. We don't want to reject the last 250 years of modern knowledge, which generally is coming from the West. At the same time, we cannot accept it 100%. So what do we need to do? We need to critically evaluate what is been written over the last 250, 300 years, right? Critical evaluation. But at the same time, we have our Torah, the writings of our Muslim scholars, whichever school of fiqh they're coming from, whichever school of philosophy they're coming from, we critically evaluate their writings as well. So it's a critical evaluation of both the Torah and modern knowledge. And then, because we want to solve our problems today in 2025 and beyond, we need solutions for today, right? So that is what in IIUM we have been trying to do. Remember just now I said the most important factor is the people factor, right? So what we have been doing in IIUM depends on the people factor in IIUM. It depends on the lecturers that we have. It depends on the students that we have, right? How far we can go depends on the lecturers and depends on the students. We have to make sure that we are improving from year to year to year, right? So maybe I will go straight to one of the challenges we are facing today in IIUM is that, you know, we are maybe losing our international students and staff, not as many as we used to get in the past, right? So in order to keep our international character, we have to increase that, and that's what we are hoping to do, right? Sometimes the problem is not within our own solution. Yeah, for example, difficult to get people to come from overseas. Why? We don't have funding. $1, $1 is 4.4 ringgit. When I was in university as a student, it was 2.5 ringgit to $1. So it would be much easier to bring lecturers and so on to come and teach. So we have that challenge, but we must overcome that. Yeah, so the people factor is crucial. Getting the best lecturers and getting the best students. Why does Oxford and Cambridge and all these universities don't have? Because they get the best. How do they get the best? They have the funds to attract the best, right? So that's something that we have to address.
Yeah. So it just shows us how important the means of funds, power, and etc. in order to change this. And I believe that Prof have given a huge relief to the international students, because they face a lot of issues when they want to come here, and many Muslim countries still struggling to sometimes the political factors and etc. But they have good intention to come to study Islamic based courses in UM, and yeah, when you mentioned about that, to address the hurdles of the international students is a good thing to discuss also in the future. Okay, I would like to move on from the generic discussion on academia, right? You already get the perceptions and general idea about the development of Islamic economics. That focuses more on graduates. So, how is the employment rate or status and feedback given by the potential employers, including industrial players, other university acceptance, and etc., towards the graduates of Islamic economics from this university?
Okay, from all our surveys that we've been doing, and I'm speaking more of economics, yeah, we have actually gotten very good feedback, whether from the public sector or even private sector, that our graduates are actually the graduates that are in great demand. Yeah, not only in Malaysia but globally. In fact, if there is one biggest success story of IIUM, it's not the journal articles that we publish in Q1 journal and research projects that win big awards. It's the graduates. IIUM all these years have been known for its graduates. Yeah, we have graduates from more than 100 countries, and they have been doing very well. Yeah, so that has been our strength. All right, and when we ask employers in Malaysia, when it comes to Islamic economics, banking, finance, IIUM is probably one of the two institutions that they are very, very happy with. Yeah, so I don't see a problem in our graduates getting jobs. Whether you get paid what you should be getting, this is another issue. Yeah, we have underemployment. This is a major problem. But getting a job for graduates, not an issue. We have been doing relatively well in terms of the view of employers. Having said that, what is it that they expect? It really does not matter whether you have an Islamic banking degree. As long as you know skills that are required in the banking sector, all right? And sometimes there are a lot of graduates not from Islamic economics or banking working in banks, right? So don't give too much emphasis on on the first degree in terms of should I go for A or B. It's fine if you choose economics or banking or finance or accounting or management. What is important is to be able to know the bigger picture. Many employers are basically saying or telling us when we interview them, yes, the degree qualification is important, but then after that, it's what you have done in your university. So being active in university, in extracurricular activities like all of you are, I hope, what activities you participate in, how you interact, how you present yourselves, right? This and your knowledge about global issues, that really matters. One added advantage we have in IIUM, you have an international environment. You have got colleagues that come from, I don't know how many countries, right? In the 4 years that you are here, these are your potential business partners, your collaborators from all the countries, right? So you should be making full use of these 4 years to not only understand your colleagues from different countries, but to interact with them, and they become your future collaborators. Learn the languages. You are here in IIUM. Don't only improve your English and Malay and Kelantanese. Yeah? Please also improve, learn French, learn Arabic, learn Mandarin. Right? This will be big advantages, and we have that. So all of you really have to take that advantage.
I'm interested in your last line, Prof, related to while I am students or graduates doing well in the outside world. In fact, I myself, you want to interview me, I also had tried many positions in the past. So I have joined bank, I have joined Department of Statistics as part of their surveillance team. I have joined as a part-time lecturer. I have joined many things, and they happily accepted me as long as you do your best. So if you want to interview me about that, because in future we will have programs related to training the future Islamic economics graduates. So if you're interested, you can join that. But going back to my question, actually, Prof, you mentioned about how well the IIUM graduates been doing outside. Some even become CEOs and etc. And at the same time, we heard that there is issues of lack of fund in IIM, even IIUM alumni, etc. So does it they not contributing back to the university, or how, or are we the one who fail to getting their interest to put more funds and to our university or etc.
Okay, you've raised a very important point. In the 80s and 90s, I think we had been very lucky in IIUM because there was a lot of government funding. Yeah, we relied almost maybe 100% on Malaysian government funding. And we were also getting funds from the Middle East, individual donors giving money for scholarships to bring students here. But since 1998, the financial crisis, for those of you who don't know, please read it up. Those funds have declined, and now with seems to be continuous problems and challenges in the economy. Funds have been not as what they used to be. So we have to find alternative sources. One of those alternative sources is from alumni. And I think we will have to admit that this is one of the sources that we are hoping to get. Yeah, and efforts are being made to try and encourage our alumni who are doing very well to contribute. But we have to keep in mind, whenever we talk about alumni contributing, people talk about Harvard, talk about Cambridge, Oxford. It looks like as if every alumni of Harvard and Cambridge, give money. No, it's not true. It's actually the few who succeed. They are the ones, maybe through their company or through their own private wealth, they contribute, right? So we need to do that for our own alumni as well. We've got now about 100,000+ graduates. More than 100,000 graduates from IIUM for the last 40 years. If each one just gives 100 ringgit, you multiply that, 100,000, add 2 more zeros, yeah? So you will get what, 10 million? You just give 100 ringgit each, 100,000 graduates, you get 1 million, 10 million.
10 million, yeah.
10 million ringgit. That's 100 ringgit per graduate per year. It doesn't have to be a year. So there is great potential, but we need to work more on this.
Okay, let's go back to the focus on the graduates. What is the most number one skill or lesson of life that you believe the graduates should have when carrying Islamic economic values, mission and vision as try the world outside?
Our third rector, Almarhum Tan Sri Professor Kamal Hassan, who was my teacher and the teacher of many, many batches, he was the lyricist of the IIUM song. Yeah, many people may not know it because it comes out at the end. I think if you go back and read the lyrics of the song, that will tell you what are the important values and traits that you need to inculcate while you're here. Yeah, the song Leading the Way, it talks about having to excel.
It's not just simply a song.
So it's not a song. The point is the song, and this is in discussion with Prof. Kamal and understanding where he's coming from. From the Islamic philosophy of education, he derived those lyrics. Okay, and of course we had a very good musician, Marhum also Johan Nawawi, who came up with the song. Yeah, but the lyrics are from Prof. Kamal, and that is coming from his understanding of what education from an Islamic perspective is all meant to be. Yeah, we have to produce Khalifa, we have to produce those who know what the amanah is, and we have to contribute to all mankind, rahmatan lil alamin. And that has become now part and parcel. You can see this all over the university. Yeah, and if we now just add what our current rector, Prof. Osman, is talking about, Tawhidic epistemology, this will really make it complete. Yeah? So read the lyrics of the song, yeah, and that will tell you what you need to do as students and later on graduates of the university.
So it's a good thing to know that the song is not just simply a song. So when you sing the song, you have to feel it. like you sing in Negaraku, right? And so you have the patriotic feeling, but when you hear about IIM song, of course, it's not about patriotic, but it's more on the values that the universities want you to have. Okay, so it's a good reminder for me too. It's not just about a beautiful song, but the beautiful meaning of it. Okay, so the next question is, perhaps I think we have 30 minutes left, so I would like to only cover 2 more questions. I think the battery is not doing well, so that's why the microphone is struggling to on and off.
So as Islamic Economics future graduates, you have to have plan B with a backup microphone. Yeah? Okay.
Inshallah. I don't know. I will try to proceed with the mic if it's still on. Moving on to let's go to the macro, right? We just discussed about the micro related to graduates and also the academics, what happened in the university, etc. If we touch a little bit about macro, Prof. Aslam also here involved in the current development of national economic policy, either directly or indirectly. And I believe there is the development of Malaysia Madani framework. Datuk Sri Anwar also referred to you a lot. Okay, so just a side note, I think it's unfair for me to comment that the alumni in the past not really contribute, because currently they heavily contributed to our IIM University. Datuk Zambi Kadir, the Minister of Higher Education, is actually the friend of Prof. Aslam, and he was the first batch also in business. And we also have Datuk Sri Anwar, even though he was not a graduate from here, but his heart is always about IIUM due to the beautiful mission that it has. Okay, so Prof. Aslam has been helping.
Use the micro. Yeah.
It's not. Sometimes it's on. Sometimes yeah.
Okay.
So Prof. Aslam has been helping our current Prime Minister to develop Madani framework. Hence, does it mean that we are already able to, bridge outside, not only just journal or just talking about graduates, but now we already reached and getting attention at the national level on the presence of Islamic economics. So what's your opinion on this?
Okay, I think when we want to talk about, so now you're talking about a particular context, yeah, the Malaysian context, where the current government is putting forward this Madani framework. You want to create a country, a society, a community that you can say manifests those pillars that form Madani. Now in English, the acronym is script, yeah, SCRIPT. So you got sustainability, you got care and compassion, you have respect, you have innovation, you have prosperity, and you have trust. Now, of course, you can add many more pillars or values that you want to promote. But, it sounds nice, script for Malaysia in English, right? In Malay, this Madani was put forward. And this Madani is probably more effective for the Malaysian context. One, of course, it's in a Malay language, it conveys the meaning, but it also is connected to our Torah. This idea that Madani, and I'm talking about the elaboration of this by our current rector, Prof. Osman, he's referring to the writings of our scholars of the past, like Al-Farabi, who talked about this thing called Madani. Some people even term the Prophet's Madinatul Munawwara as the first Madani community, all right? And what were the values that were being promoted? This value of care and compassion. When the Muhajirun went to Medina, the Ansar, what did the Ansar show them? Care and compassion, right? And you talk about innovation, the ideas that were being put forward to manage Medina were very innovative, right? Respect for each other. Of course, sustainability may be a bit difficult for us to go back 1400 years and talk about sustainability as how we understand it today. Prosperity, Look at how the Muslim community expanded and how it went all over the world. And then amana. Everyone understood the trust, the amana that was given to you, right? So these core values are what we are trying to do in Malaysia today. We don't need to always call everything Islamic, 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 right? Sometimes it's more important to manifest those values that you find in the Islamic, ethos. And these 6 pillars for sure are part and parcel of what we want to promote. And I think again this morning when he was here and he gave his lecture, he again stressed that in Malaysia, we cannot be exclusive without realizing that we have about 40% of our population that are non-Muslims. We must show the world that the Islam that we have is one that is inclusive. We have to show care and compassion, respect, the trust in society, and it's sometimes not easy in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. And therefore, it's really a big challenge in Malaysia. How do we show the world that we are not only the leaders in Islamic economics, banking, finance, but in living together? Islam is meant to be rahmatan lil alamin.
All right, so let's wrap up our conversation today. So since we have reached, we have 25 minutes left, but I think we can stretch perhaps some more minutes for Q&A. Don't worry, I know you have lots of questions you want to ask. But this is the last question to our speaker today. So from what you have commented and shared with us, Prof, just now, what is your final conclusion on the growth of Islamic economics? First, in the academia. Second, on the graduates' quality as well. And third, the impacts of Islamic economics to the world outside, etc., to the community, policy, etc. Do you find it positive, half a success, or even a failure if you have set of expectation but it doesn't reach that? So what's your comment on this?
I think in Islam we are never meant to be pessimists. Yeah? We must always be optimists, right? We have to always look positively, despite the fact that we may not reach everything that we want to achieve, right? We are supposed to learn lessons and move forward, and always have that optimistic view, because we have knowledge, we try our best, and then we leave it to Allah to determine the outcome. This is the way that we are supposed to look at things. As far as the discipline is concerned, I think the last 10 years, 15 years has given a new life to Islamic economics. What do I mean by this? I think as far as the discipline is concerned, we have moved away from overly focusing on Islamic banking, especially that fiqh-oriented Islamic banking. And today, people are talking about the need to be looking at the bigger picture. Equity and justice, growth and equity. No longer just talking about finance.
Sustainability.
Yeah, and talking about it in the context of sustainable development. I think it has given us an opportunity to revisit Islamic economics. And now the discourse outside is more holistic. So I see that as a positive move in the last 10 years or so. In the 1990s, it was very difficult to convince people that you need to connect Islamic finance to Islamic economics. They would just say Islamic banking finance is good enough. Today, people realize now you can't do that.
Even industry are more open. Is it what?
Even industry, even Bank Negara is talking about, in Malaysia, value-based intermediation. No longer looking at banking as just a banking institution. You have to go beyond profit. Yeah, looking for how you benefit society. This is what I think pioneer Islamic economists talked about in the late 60s and 70s. So the environment has given us a second opportunity to develop Islamic economics and connect it to banking, finance, and so on. So that's academia. As far as graduates are concerned, yeah, so far our graduates are doing very well. There's always room for improvement. Our first dean, Professor Said Osman Al-Habshi, told us in class many years ago, I'm sure it's not his saying, he's quoting somebody, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. That's the biggest room in the world, the room for improvement. So we can always improve, whether it's in academia or whether it's in the graduates that we produce. Yeah, but I'm confident today you are better off because you have better references, you have many more references, you have lecturers who are probably more qualified with PhDs and so on, right? We have curriculum that is already incorporating the integrated approach, but we can always improve. So that's as far as students. The third one was what? In terms of?
The third one is on the impacts of Islamic economics to the world outside, perhaps national policies, community.
Okay, now when it comes to convincing people outside, you can talk as much as you want. People want to see results. So how do you convince the people outside, whether Malaysia or outside Malaysia, whether Muslim world or the West or wherever? Through your result, through your outcome. So we must show success. People don't want to listen to you if you are not able to show success. So we need to show that it works. We need to show that Islamic economics provides a better alternative than the modern economics. We need to show that Islamic banking finance is better than the conventional riba-based banking and finance. We have to show it. It's only by proving it that people will look up to what you're doing. Now, are you going to have it easy way? No. There's going to be a lot of people who will try to stop you, to distract you. This is what our challenge is. We need to show success.
So success is one of the strong arguments to refute to those people who are skeptical, because there are two kinds of people who are skeptical or perhaps not believe in Islamic approach. First is those who not aware yet. Second is those who may totally against it. So whatever you try to convince, they don't want to believe it. The first group is the one that you should target, because they only would like to see how you can convince them. Because I believe in the early beginning of Islamic banks, we have lots of non-Muslims, trying to also explore, because the Islamic bank mentioned that they can provide you opportunity, a fairer transaction or profit, etc. But now it's not really doing well because we're not able to prove to them that we are better than the conventional side.
Even at the university level, we have to show that IIUM is a better university than other universities. What is it that makes IIUM better? All right, the criteria that sometimes some of these ranking, figures give may not be criteria that support our goal admission, right? But we cannot keep on arguing and saying that these rankings are a waste of time. We have to actually show that we are better and present to them why we are better and argue this convincingly. So it's up to us, really. At the end of the day, we are responsible to carry that amanah, to show that we are leading the way.
That's the last question from me as the moderator. So now I would like to open the floor for you guys to ask questions that you believe are important for you.
I was telling one that I want to hear many questions from all of you. So please, looking forward to this.
So please, anyone would like to ask, if perhaps it should, I hope it's related to the topics. So please, anyone coming from committees or non-committees, is up to you. See please, Aina.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, let me just put everybody and whoever is going to be watching this later, despite whatever criticism we may have about Islamic banking, we still support Islamic banking. Why? Because it is an alternative to the riba-based system. Whether we have criticism on how it is run and it's better if they do this rather than this, it is still an alternative that has been put forward by our scholars and practiced to give an option and an alternative to Muslims and non-Muslims. All right, so let's get that very clear. Having said that, as I mentioned earlier, the early maybe 20, 25 years of Islamic banking in Malaysia followed a certain model that has been criticized for replicating the conventional system. So in conventional system, you give loans, you use the word loans. It's not, Islamic banks don't give loans. They basically are trade or sale-based institutions. They buy and they sell. Okay, so contract-wise, it is very different. Yeah, so but it, in a way, is the closest to the conventional, and we can understand because the bankers are trained in banking, right? So when they want to start Islamic banking, they would do what they are used to, all right? Despite the fact that Islamic economists probably were very critical of what they were doing, all right? But like I said, in the last 10, 15 years, the opportunity has now come about that allows us to interact much better with the Islamic banking practitioners. They are now looking for alternatives because of that criticism, because of they themselves realizing that Islamic banking, the old model, cannot go any further. All right, and even our Prime Minister, if you listen to the budget speech last year and read the text, he's talking about Islamic economics, Islamic banking finance, and he said that we want to continue to promote Islamic banking, but not the banking of the old model, right? He mentioned in the budget speech, he wants to see a more innovative Islamic banking that is doing the things that actually the Islamic economists were talking about. He is one person who is very, very, let's say, supportive of the ideas of one of the pioneer Islamic economists, Najatullah Siddiqui. He's always quoting Najatullah Siddiqui and Almarhum Yusuf Qaradawi. These are the two people that he always quotes, and promoting an alternative to the current Islamic banking way. What does it mean? That we are not only looking at Islamic banks as a financial institution, but we are looking at Islamic banking to provide for the well-being of society. So you cannot provide for the well-being of society if you are only thinking of your shareholders. The previous model was a shareholder model. Now we are talking about a stakeholder model. So who are the stakeholders? Of course, the shareholders,
people,
but
consumers,
society, the government, the environment, right? So these are the stakeholders now. And I think this provides that new model. So hopefully, as we move forward, this is going to be what Islamic banking finance emphasizes. And we can also have a better relationship between Islamic economists and the Islamic banking practitioners. We look forward to this. And we are quite confident that the current government is supporting us because for the first time, good news, we were allocated funds to do research in Islamic economics and finance, yeah, not just Islamic banking, Islamic economics and finance. So it shows that it's a positive change.
So does it answer your question?
No.
Indicator of success.
We must be able to show that Islamic bank is not only...
I mean beyond bank, I think.
Yeah. We must be able to show that Islamic banking is not only providing good profits for their shareholders, but that Islamic banking is contributing to poverty alleviation, to providing infrastructure development for, and especially for the less well-to-do. That Islamic banking is somehow rather able to reduce the inequality in society, right? Those are the indicators that we need to be developing.
Okay, so any other questions from other participants? Yes, right?
Salam. Okay, thank you. You raised very important. You brought zakat and wakaf into the picture. Firstly, I just want to to mention and remind everyone that when we talk about zakat and wakaf, you have to look at these institutions as part of that bigger Islamic institutional framework, right? I get worried when 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people also wanted to look at zakat and wakaf as part of banking and finance. It was very worrying. Alhamdulillah, today, people realize that zakat and especially wakaf are not necessarily anything to do with banking finance. Although you may use Islamic banks to operationalize, because banking network is very extensive and they can assist in distributing these things. But zakat and wakaf should be seen, if you FIE, I'm sure all of you have done FIE, Foundations of Islamic Economics, you will know that they are part of the distributional framework in Islam. Zakat is obligatory, wakaf is a highly recommended instrument that you can have. Now, zakat has got specific uses. And that is why, in terms of expecting zakat to solve all your problems, it's not going to happen. Because it's, overall it's 2.5%. And the uses are to the asnaf, the 8 asnaf, right? So it has a role, fakir, miskin, riqab, and so on. But that's zakat. Even that 2.5% or a little bit more in other cases must be efficiently collected and distributed. Alhamdulillah, again in the Malaysian context, because you're asking Malaysian context, I think we have improved our zakat collection and distribution leaps and bounds. When I was a student, I became research assistant to a lecturer who was doing zakat. The head of the zakat department at that time, the Majlis Agama, qualification SPM. Okay, in some states. Can you imagine that? Today, I think in every zakat agency in Malaysia, you probably have somebody with a first degree, if not a master's, or maybe even PhD. All right. So qualification-wise, we have got human resource now that should be much more qualified. So I think efficiency and effectiveness of zakat and wakaf have improved a lot. Now, having said that, can we improve? Much more. Wakaf has got endless possibilities because there's no restriction, right? Unfortunately, in Malaysia, we still have mindset that looks at wakaf. What do I give wakaf for? I want to give my land to build madrasah or to build masjid or to build surau or cemetery. What else? Basically, that's what the mindset is still like that. But wakaf actually can be used for any good outcome. Okay, so one of the things that we are trying to do for IIUM is to actually make the endowment fund that we have, the wakaf that we have, to be used for the upkeep of the university, of the facilities. Just imagine if people are willing to give endowment to provide better facilities in the mahalla, in the hostel. I mean, somebody asked the question this morning to the Prime Minister. The living conditions, are not that great. Yeah. So if we can promote wakaf among Muslims, not only in Malaysia but everywhere, provide endowment, not to build masjid or to build surau, or to give money to what do you call it, cemetery or whatever, but to improve the hostel conditions. This would be something very, very important. And we had it in our history, especially in Ottoman Caliphate. If you look at what the wakaf was used for, incredible variety, even to the aspect of having wakaf to take care of the stray animals.
The hospital and etc.
Hospitals, yeah, stray animals, including dogs. So I know we have a dog problem in IIUM, yeah, but wakaf to take care of the stray dogs and stray cats. Of course, we have also cat problem in IIUM, right? So wakaf for that, right? So the use of wakaf is really very, very wide, and I think that is maybe the way forward in the future when you're talking about funding problems. That wakaf instrument is probably what we have to develop and to do much more work.
Okay, yours. So please.
Waalaikumsalam. KICT.
Prof, I have some questions that we in our country are facing the problems of Islamic banking as well as Islamic economics. So there is a research that we have seen, we have made that 90% of our bankings are non-Islamic. In fact, the way they are dealing also is not this non-Islamic.
90% of the Islamic banking is not Islamic.
90% of our bankings
Banking.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Islamic economics or something.
Yeah, okay.
So it's very big challenge because I have seen in Senate Assembly they are discussing about how they can put Islamic way in our economy, but it becomes very much challenge because there are different tribes, religions, and so on. So I want to know what will be the starting points for us to start implementing Islamic banking in our country and as well as Islamic economics. Thank you.
What is the percentage of Muslims in Nigeria?
Like Malaysia, mistaken?
Sorry? 65. So
like
about
Malaysia.
right?
Yeah, it's like Malaysia.
About Malaysia. Okay. So, I suppose, but again, you know better, the Malaysian example of doing things gradually, of introducing policies that are not overnight, focusing on education, creating more universities that are offering programs in Islamic banking finance or in Islamic economics, having the political will, whether it's a state level or at I know in Nigeria, of course, you have north and south divide. So maybe the northern part is ready for Islamic banking and finance, but you need the people who are going to lead it.
So you mean goes back to your formula of 3 Ps?
Yeah, 3 Ps. So whether it's Nigeria, Malaysia, whatever country, you need the political will. If it's not in the government, the community, right? Your community organizations have to work together, and then you need the people. So hopefully all of the graduates from Nigeria that come from IIUM will go back and contribute. I already know there are a few of our graduates from economics who are now playing very important roles in Nigeria in trying to promote Islamic economics and Islamic banking and finance. And then of course the policies, right? So this is something that you have to do. It has to be gradual. I don't think it can be revolutionary, because when it's something that is very drastic, it's not sustainable, and then it will immediately get a counter reaction. So whatever you do, there will be people who will, who will counter that, and you don't want anything to happen in Nigeria that pushes back whatever reforms you want to do. So political will, people, and the right policies. I think that's maybe what I can advise you now. But certainly we have quite a number of graduates from Nigeria, back in Nigeria now, hopefully working to promote Islamic economic development and to be leading the way, as our song says. Yes. Salam. Malawi.
Yes, the southern part of Africa. Yeah, actually, we are living in the world where innovation is more fast. That is in every aspect of life, in terms of finance, economics, and then we see things like now we are into the cryptocurrencies, the blockchain systems, the NFTs. So my question is, what is being done, or what should be done to ensure that the Islamic economics or finance remains relevant in the face of these changes?
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned Madani earlier. The I, I'm not sure whether the I in Madani, but definitely the I in script is innovation, right? It's about innovation. So there is recognition that if you want to talk about reforms, and in this case Islamic economic reforms, innovation is something that you must be part of. And in today's world, of course, it's all about AI and so on. So we must master whatever innovation there is. There is no way that you can talk about success if you are not mastering innovation.
Being creative, you mean?
And being creative, okay? Being creative. In the Muslim world in general, we are still way behind, right? I mean, in today's world, just look at China and how they have come up in the last 40 years from being a communist, Marxist ideology running China to what it is today, just in 40 years, right? Islamic economics, 45 years, 50 years. Yeah? So we need to learn from people who have succeeded, right? And therefore we have to master. Now, mastering doesn't mean you become the slave of AI. We need to master, but make sure that it is the human being that is the master of AI and not the other way around. Okay? We must be producers of that AI, not only consumers. Again, in the Muslim world, we are consumers. We are adopters. We don't even adapt. What more innovate, right? So we have to give a lot of attention to these areas. Personally, to me, my knowledge of AI is almost as bad as one. Yeah, maybe he's worse than me. I don't know. Yeah, but for those of you who are inclined towards it, master it, understand it, and then adapt and innovate and become the producers. Are we not able to produce? No, we are. In fact, I think many of these big companies, they are all coming from the Asian continent, whether it's China, India, or even in the Muslim world, right? You got all these people who go to US and Europe and become the leaders there. Why? Because the facilities are there available. So we have to become leaders in this innovation part. And I think again that is why Muslim countries have no other choice. I was speaking to somebody this morning talking about the Middle East, and they were saying that in many areas in the Middle East, in some of the Middle East countries, they actually have gone very far in terms of innovation. Although it's not spread to the community level, but some of their leaders are really, really good. So I think there is realization among Muslim nations that you must be able to master this innovation area. Yeah? And whatever that is, we must be giving attention to making sure that human beings control the AI. I mean, even the word says it, artificial intelligence, right? So you want the natural intelligence, human intelligence to dominate, not artificial intelligence. You know, I'm sure I've not answered your question, but yeah, maybe you know more than me, maybe in this. Yeah?
When you mentioned about creativity, Prof, it's kind of surprised my mind that all of these innovations actually coming from the Western-based finance, right? So they created everything, cryptocurrency and even crowdfunding, etc. And I think perhaps it's something to do with our syllabus, perhaps. So maybe it needs to insights creativity too. And I'm very happy actually trying to, if you're able to innovate new company for me to crowdfunding to startup. We have the cradle, right, from the West. They're coming with idea of the company's cradle. You can invest, get the profits. I'm happy if you have the firm kind of that to invest myself because I have some surplus of fund, etc. But we are waiting for anybody who would like to do that. So I think creativity is important here.
Yeah, creativity is very important. And whether or not there is something in Muslim society that inhibits creativity, I think if you go, and that's where the Turath is important. I think if you go back to our history, you will find that there were periods in which we were very creative, right? We were the leaders. You know, people don't realize. They look at Western civilization now and they see tremendous progress and development. But if you look at history in terms of periods, the Muslims were leaders for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, probably the longest in the history of mankind. The current Western civilization is about 300, 400 years old at the most, right? 1,000 years. So it's not to say that we don't have that ability to be creative. But the study of our Torah, of our history, like I said, what we did right and what we did wrong. So there were certain things that we also did wrong. So we need to learn lessons as well. So that's why the study of history of our own past is very important. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world today, we don't give enough attention on that study of history. Yeah, in most economics programs, we don't emphasize the history of Islamic economic thought or the history of economic thought. Because why? The market doesn't give value to history. Yeah, but we need to learn our history and to learn the positive examples and also the negatives, right? And that is why I think when you're talking about developing a country and the nation for the future, while the sciences are very important, technical subjects, don't forget history, don't forget humanities, don't forget philosophy. It's also very important, right? I think this is what we're doing now in IIUM. We're trying to bring back an emphasis also on philosophy. I think in IRKH they are trying to rename Usuluddin and bring in philosophy as well into the syllabus. The idea is to learn both the good examples and also the bad, but learn from the bad as well.
So maybe we will take the last question before we wrap up our session. I believe that one of the sisters will have one question if you want to ask. Okay, sure.
Salam.
I would like to ask, in regards to, for example, the future of Islamic economics, there are this term called, maybe the thing is statistically insignificant, but economically significant. For example, the study of zakat in which zakat have been seen as actually statistically insignificant. However, it is economically significant. Now, in this state, how are we going to sell Islamic economics if, for example, the statistic does not back us up? And then that's number one. And then we're going to talk about, it seems like Islamic economics is following trends. For example, recently the movement of degrowth and Islamic economics, I wouldn't say trailblaze, it's more like they closely tailgate saying that we also have that kind of thought. And every time there's a trend, for example, SDGs or the older goals and everything, Islamic economics as it is to say that we actually have that in the Quran and we actually have that in the Hadith, but we did not pioneer such trend. So my question to you is, how do we marketize if this is the condition of the current progress of Islamic economics?
Okay, thank you. These are two very good questions. The first one, you specifically mentioned about zakat, 2.5% generally, and therefore there's only so much you can do. And I think you can always compare, and I do this, in class. If you look at how much your potential zakat collection is, even whatever model you use, at the most it will be about 2.5 to 3.5% of your GDP. All right. If you look in modern economics, the G in your macroeconomics, it's about 20+% for Malaysia, right? So your zakat is 2.5, 3%, and your G is 20+%. So 10 times more. So how much can you do for zakat? So statistically, and that's the potential zakat. The actual zakat collection is probably 0.1, 0.2% of GDP, right? So statistically very small. However, don't forget, you should not be looking at zakat as a purely economic instrument. The purpose of zakat is to purify your soul and to purify your wealth. Why? Because it doesn't belong to you. So I think the way to argue is that when you look at some of these institutions that have economic meaning, like zakat, it's a kind of a redistributive tool. But don't consider zakat to be a tax, right? Because as I keep telling the accounting students, one of the things you will do is to become a tax consultant. And what is the job of the tax consultant? It's to basically advise your client how to pay as least tax as possible. If you say zakat is a tax and you become a zakat consultant, what would be your job? It's not to tell your client how to pay minimum zakat, right? It would be to pay. It would be to pay what is due, right? So don't look at zakat as just economic or a economic. It is part of that institution that has an important role of purifying your wealth and giving away that part that does not belong to you, right? So it may be statistically insignificant. It has an economic role because even though it's 0.1 or 1%, it can, for example, eradicate hardcore poverty. There are many studies to show zakat, if implemented correctly, it can eradicate hardcore poverty in many Muslim countries. So it has economic significance. All right. So the argument is, don't always look at these institutions just from an economic point of view. There are other matters. Now, your second question I thought was very, very interesting. The idea that when you look at the development, sorry, just repeat again. What is it? The second part of the question was?
I was asking when we look at the SDGs.
Okay, we are always following. Yeah. Now, this is part of the cycle of life and the cycle of civilizations. The winners always determine, and this is coming from Ibn Khaldun, when he analyzed, the world during his time. The winners will always dominate the losers, right? So civilizations that are in power, that are in dominant position, will always lead. We led for maybe 800 years, and even at the end of the Muslim world, we were no longer leading in terms of ideas, but we were still, the leaders in terms of GDP, in terms of value. For the last 300 plus years, we have been followers, right? So when we want to introduce Islamic economics, we have to use the term Islamic. Whereas for mainstream neoclassical economics, they just say economics, right? We want to give an alternative, we have to give an adjective to it. So, and as you said, whatever trends that are there, we have this apologetic position. Yes, we also have it. The way to overcome this is, we have to go and study our Turath. And when we study our Turath, we have to be able to look at the principles that are there in the Turath, and we realize that many of those principles are actually universal principles. They may come into being and meaningful at certain points in history. Okay, I give you a simple example. There is enough evidence to show that when our architects, they were not maybe called architects, but when they built our mosques, even in the hottest countries, they didn't have air conditioning. But they built the mosques in such a way, they used, the forces of nature. They designed the mosque in such a way, using during the day, the winds blow a certain way, during night, the winds. And using that technology, they were able to build mosques that were cool during the summer, warm during the winter. All right? Now, today, we will say this is all about environmentally friendly, and they didn't have that in those times. But whatever they did, with that knowledge and mastery of innovation and technology, they were able to be at the forefront, of what they were doing. Similarly, medicine. Go back to our Turath, the Hippocratic Oath still comes from Ibn Sina's principles, that guided. He may not have been called a doctor, right? But the principles he used. So what you find in our Turath, they will always become relevant as we go along. The fact that we are going to be led by the West, maybe in 30 years' time, it will be from China, right? Maybe later it will be from India. Maybe in this part of the world, it will be in Indonesia, right? We always think that we are ahead of Indonesia, but maybe in 20, 30 years, Indonesia will be leading. The fact that we always go back to our Turath, look for those principles, they are always relevant, okay? But in order to lead the way, we need to make sure that even though we may be following certain trends, we must always know where that is in our Turath, okay? And as one scholar put it very nicely, Said Nawab Haider Naqvi, one of the pioneer Islamic economists, but who doesn't get much attention compared to many others. He says we don't have to be apologetic if we find certain Islamic economic teachings, they are similar to what you may find in capitalist structure or socialist structure. Don't be apologetic. As long as we have it in our Turath, it's ours. Yeah. So even if our policies that we want to promote, or it's available in this country, or it's available in this system, as long as we can find the evidence in our own Turath, whether it's in the Quran, in the Sunnah, or in the views of the scholars, or even in our own intellectual ijtihad, it's ours. It's Islamic, right? So I think the idea is increase your knowledge, get the wisdom that knows the limits of that knowledge, go to our Turath, and then critically engage. That will be the way I think that we develop Islamic economics.
Goes back to the idea of Islamization of knowledge.
Well, critical evaluation can be Islamization, can also be the relevantization part of our Turath as well as modern knowledge. Critically evaluate both and then synthesize and integrate them.
Okay, so unfortunately, we have reached the end of our session today. I would like to say thank you very much to our honorable speaker today, Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Haneef. Maybe some of you not know yet, but Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Haneef is my dear teacher that has been helping me a lot actually. And if you found any achievement that I had, actually it was, I would rather say it's contributed by my own teachers a lot, especially including Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Haneef.
Inshallah, finishing PhD by September.
So I will try my best about that too. Yeah.